Qualifying for the Europa Conference League final is non-negotiable for Chelsea, but who do they field tomorrow night and how do they beat their Swedish host Djurgarden? Lads, lasses and the rest of the masses, welcome back to the lead-in. Let's firstly predict some lineups for the two teams, then we'll talk tactics. Starting with Chelsea, I think Enzo Maresca is going to play a relatively strong side here as he has in the past few rounds of this competition, but not as strong as before due to wanting to rest certain players for the upcoming Liverpool game, as well as the opposition in this game being slightly weaker than the opponents that we have faced previously. Firstly, let's talk about the players that are unavailable for this game. Wesley Fofana, Mark Guiu, Omari Kellyman and now Malo Gusto are long-term injuries and won't feature. Misha Mudryk is still out with suspension, and Romeo Lavia is not included in the UECL squad list, though I doubt he'd feature anyway due to fitness. So, without further ado, I'll be putting our Chelsea side into the 4-3-3, though this will change in-game into a 3-4-3. First up in goal will be Philip Jørgensen as ever, rotating in between the sticks. The back four looks strange on paper, but starting at right back is going to be Cobham graduate Josh Achimpong. The centre-back partnership is one we've seen numerous times in this competition now, as Tosin Adarabioyo partners Benoit Badiashile in the right and left centre-back spots respectively. Finishing off this line will be our captain, Reece James. Though left back isn't his preferred position, he's played here in the past and with Gusto injured, someone needs to fill in there. Moving into midfield, let's start with the deepest player. That's going to be Moises Caicedo doing double duty as usual. Ahead of him will be two players that always start these games, Christopher Nkunku and Kiernan Dewsbury Hall. That just leaves the three attackers, and after his impressive stint on the left of the three against Everton, Noni Madueke returns to his favoured right side. On the opposite flank will be Jadon Sancho, who's operated here in this competition a few times in the past, and finally the man up top to lead the line will be Tyreek George, who's been used as a rotational striker in recent matches. Now let's briefly look at our opponents for tomorrow. Djurgarden like to set up in either the 4-3-3 or the 4-2-3-1, and for this game I'll be lining Jani Honkavara's side up in the latter. Firstly, let's go over their absentees because they are rather important. The Swedes are without Malcolm Nilsson Safqvist, Rasmus Schuler and Patrick Aslund due to injury, and there are doubts over the fitness of Oskar Falenius and Nino Zugele as they both came off the pitch with injuries in the second leg versus Rapid Vienna. Jacob Rinner should be fine to return to the side after he missed the Erste game due to illness. That being said, the first player going into the side will be Jacob Rinner, recovering from illness in time to start in net for the hosts. The back four is a strong one. Starting with the right back, it's going to be another start here for Adam Stahl. The centre-back partnership is the duo of captain Jacob Una Larsson and fellow countryman Marcus Danielsson. Finally, over on the left will be Japanese native Keita Kosugi, who scored last time out in this competition. Moving into the midfield, let's talk about the two holding players, and this is pretty standard for them with both Daniel Stenson and Hampus Findel starting here. As for the more advanced midfielders, there's some rotation here due to injury, so I'd expect Santeri Harala to come into the side on the right. In the centre remains Tobias Gullikson, whose 2 goals in extra time helped seal the win in the last round. Finally, over on the left is going to be Tokmak Win, who moves over to the left from the striker position. That leaves one man up top, and I'd imagine that August Prisk comes in here to lead the line. That's both teams lined up, so now how do Chelsea beat their opposition here? Let's find out. Before we talk about the tactics though, it's time for today's question of the day. Yes, we're bringing it back, and it's a relatively simple one today, so let me know in the comments down below, what 11 would you pick for Chelsea in this fixture? Okay, so here we have the team lined up, and as I mentioned previously, this team is not going to stay in this 4 at the back formation. We've seen this numerous times over this season, and from this left hand side, James will be the player that inverts into the midfield. Now, whether he holds this role with Caicedo as a 2, or whether he plays it on his own and lets Caicedo go a bit further up the pitch is yet to be seen. We've seen both of those variants be used by Enzo Maresca in recent games. Now with this, obviously the team at the back here, the centre-backs will rotate across as I've just shown, with Josh Achimpong playing on this right centre-back spot. Because we have seen Josh do this at times. In fact, we saw it in the Copenhagen game, I believe it was the first leg, where he played on the left-hand side and was inverting into this midfield where he could kind of drive through the midfield and ball carry, and he was very, very good at doing that. But I don't think that's going to happen in this game. I think we're going to kind of keep Josh in this favoured right back / right centre back role where he can play quite easily. I think that when substitutions come in, perhaps he moves into the midfield to supplement that, probably alongside James. We've seen that in the past. But for the most part, I think that's kind of how we'll see the back line kind of line up. The midfield is a bit more interesting. Now, I've put in Caicedo because I feel like Caicedo is so important to the team and gives us a bit more defensive stability, but there is definitely the argument that Palmer could play. We've seen him and Kieran Dewsbury-Hall kind of play as dual 10s at times up here with where I've put in Nkunku. But I think that we'd want to rest Palmer for the Liverpool game. I think he's really, really important in terms of our playmaking, and hopefully he can kind of do that, especially after his injury that he's had recently. Hopefully he can get some fitness in his legs and then play in that Liverpool game. Whereas Caicedo, it has never been injured. He is basically a complete stalwart of this game, of this team in general, and he can kind of play through these games. So he's the one I've chosen here. Likewise, there could have been the option of Marc Cucurella coming into this left back spot. And maybe he being the one that inverts with either James or Caicedo kind of being in here. But I digress. That's kind of what I've gone through here. As for the front line, now I've put in Tyreek George. We've seen him play in this striker role a few times recently, and he's been very, very good at it when he's been given the opportunity. Now, he obviously could play off the left-hand side. I've put in Madueke here. I think we do need a slightly stronger kind of attack. We saw what happened in the Legia game, where in the first half, we didn't really start very well until we had a player like Madueke on the pitch to kind of drive into the box and get those opportunities and force mistakes rather than kind of waiting for them to happen. So I've put Madueke in here. I've put, obviously, as I said, I've put Nkunku in this 10 role because I think that he plays way better in this 10 role than he does as a 9. We've spoken about this in the past, how poor Nkunku can be when he plays up top as a 9. He doesn't really do the things that we kind of expect from a 9 in this role. But in the recent games where he's kind of played a little more reserved and played into this kind of 10 role, he's been pretty decent. And with the way that this team kind of functions with this box midfield sometimes turning into a diamond, I feel like he really, really benefits when the team kind of rotates around like this and we get this kind of setup. Now, James and Caicedo, of course, can interchange. They can play either way around, so that could be the way we see it, with James playing as the base and Caicedo going a bit higher. Maybe we even see Kieran Dewsbury-Hall playing on this opposite side, because I had put them that way around. I could put them in this way around as well. And with this being the way, we could see Nkunku obviously rotate this way, Caicedo playing as this right centre mid, James being the holder, and then Dewsbury-Hall on his favoured left side, able to progress the ball up this side with Sancho. Now, as I mentioned in the team lineups, that Djurgarden play this kind of 4-2-3-1 formation. Sometimes it's a bit more of a 4-3-3 with one of the kind of midfielders dropping a bit deeper, but they do like to play with quite an offensive team from what I've watched. And with these two holders, we see the benefit of Enzo Maresca's setup here with the 3 at the back and the 4 in midfield here, because we've spoken about this in the past, but for those of you that are new and do not understand this concept, we play with a box midfield so we can get 4 players here up against the 3 that they have. And obviously with that extra man, it makes it much easier for us to navigate the ball around when the ball is in these central areas. When a player gets pressed, there's always going to be a spare man, and if the player that is getting pressed or not getting pressed rather, is one of these more advanced players, for example, say this defensive midfielder comes up here to pass to James, he can easily get this pass through to Kieran Dewsbury-Hall in space, where we can then drive forward and try and get opportunities if they press us. However, in this game, I don't think we're going to see that happen particularly all the time, because of how Djurgarden are and the fact they are 100% the underdogs in this game, and they are 100% a weaker side than we've kind of faced in previous rounds. We will see them drop very deep. They have very good explosive wingers, and the player who I've also put in their 10 role is also a very explosive player. Very good from shooting outside the box as well. They are going to play this really, really flat 4-4-1-1, I would imagine, or even a 4-5-1 we could call it, and they're going to play really, really far back and try and be pragmatic and hit us on the break. Even though this is a home game for them, I don't expect them to be particularly expansive, and what this kind of forces us to do is something that we've been relatively poor at in recent times, but we're kind of slowly getting better at it, and it's to break down this low block. Now, they're going to pack their box with their back 4. They're going to try and double up on the wingers when the ball goes out to the wingers. For example, with Sancho here, he's up against not only his fullback, but he's also up against this right winger that's over here as well. And what this basically means is that we're going to have to try and commit an extra body forward. I've spoken about this in the past, and this really, really helped in one of our previous European games, where we play this formation with the 3 centre-backs here. At some point during this game, there will have to be times where we leave Tosin and Badiashile up here as they loan two centre-backs, and Joshua Chempong moves up further in order to get into this type of area up high with Madueke, where he can cancel out that 2v1 advantage and make this into a 2v2, which is much more favourable. Or he's going to have to come into midfield to allow someone else, like for example Reece James, to kind of get higher into that Cucurella position that we've seen him play to facilitate it on the other side, or even Caicedo, who can go a little bit higher. We know him playing as that right back, kind of inverting into the midfield role. He's very good at doing that, so he could obviously play in that role if needs be. But at some point we're going to have to commit an extra body forward so we can cancel out this man advantage out wide. Now, we always see when we get the ball with Madueke, for example, on this right side, this happens more often with players that aren't Madueke, because I feel like he's a bit more expansive. He's a player that can burst around the outside, can burst inside and kind of make things happen, which is why I've put him in here today. When he is shrouded out by two players, we see this constant pattern of play happen where we pass the ball out to him on the wing or whoever is out here. There is no avenue to get past these two players. The ball will then go back, and then the ball will go back, and then we'll keep recycling possession, and we go again. Now, this is perfectly fine against a team that don't provide much threat against us, because we can keep control, we can keep possession, and they will not score, and they will not beat us. However, there has to be a point where we need to break forward and actually get into the box, and I've kind of set this team up in a way that I think benefits from them playing this kind of low block style. Because we saw from the Legia game where we won 3-0 that we were very, very poor in the first half because we were very, very passive and we were passing it around, and we didn't commit the extra man forward. But when we did in the second half, we won 3-0 in that half, and by getting an extra player forward, we allowed Madueke on this right hand side to just completely run riot on this right hand side, and also kind of getting the other players involved as well. For example, George scored from the striker role because he was reactive to a shot from outside the box from Reece James, and that opportunity for Reece James actually arose from the right hand side with Madueke getting into space because Joshua Chempong had moved further forward. I've spoken about this more at length in the breakdown I did for that match, so if you want to watch that, I recommend you do. The link will be down in the description, and where I talk about that more in depth. But the reason why I think that is very important to point out here against this team is because the one thing that we do not do very often against these low block sides, and it's something which I'm encouraging us to do in this side, and in this game against this side, is to shoot from outside the box. We don't shoot from outside the box enough. Now, we know that Kiernan Dewsbury Hall is a player that can arrive and he can shoot from outside the box. We've seen him do that. Hopefully he can do that. And Kunku, again, is another one who can shoot from outside the box, though he does prefer to kind of get the ball in the area. He's more of a functioning player when he's closer to the goal, but he can shoot from outside the box. If we can get the aforementioned James into a position where he can shoot from outside the box, and it's just that situation that we don't bring up enough, which I mentioned briefly earlier, that a lot of the time when we are playing and people kind of think that we're playing very passively is because we don't force the opposition to make mistakes. We wait for them to make mistakes instead, and it's why a lot of the time it feels like we're not actually doing anything when we are, because nothing really happens and we're kind of waiting for those opportunities to arise whilst this is being recycled like I'm showing here. And then when the opportunity does arise for a player to get to make an advance on a mistake, for example, say this left winger presses a bit too high here for a Chempong and the ball gets turned over to Madueke, now there's that opportunity for him to go and drive at his fullback and take that 1v1. Now, I've spoken at length about how 1v1s are so important to this Enzo Maresca system, and it's making those 1v1s that allows us to get opportunities. So usually we wait for a mistake like this to happen so we can get that 1v1, but we cannot do that in games where the team are going to sit back as far as possible, because as I said, they have this two-man advantage. We have to force them to make a mistake by either bringing Joshua Chempong up here and making him have to be marked, allowing Madueke to get this space against this fullback, or we have to do things that are a bit unorthodox that will kind of force mistakes or force saves and make parries and stuff like that. And one of those things that you can do is shooting from outside the box. We saw it in that Legia game where we get that shot from outside the box from James, and though it's not a great shot and it doesn't go in the goal or anything, the goalkeeper is forced to make a save. He parries it straight out to a reactive young forward like George, who then gets a goal from it, and we get a goal from absolutely nothing just because we decided to shoot. And that's something I'd really, really like to see in this game, because we are going to be on top of this game for the majority of the time. We are going to have the majority of the players in their half for the majority of the game, and I don't really want us to see I don't really want to see that kind of slow build up that we've been seeing in recent times in terms of us taking a while to get into games. This is a team that is largely worse than the two teams that we have faced previously in Legia Warsaw and Copenhagen. I think that Djurgarden are much the underdogs in this tournament, and they've gotten through to this round with a bit of luck, a bit of grit, a bit of determination. I think that they were rather fortunate to get through the last round, because the opponents that they were against got a very, very early red card, and that allowed them to kind of step on them. But they're not going to be able to do that against us, and especially a team of our quality and a team of our stature. I don't think that they would, even at home, as this is a fixture in their home stadium, I don't think that they would be brave enough to kind of step on us. And if they do decide to step on us and they come up and try and play a bit more brave and a bit more aggressively, we are going to absolutely pass it around them and score multiple goals on them. So I think that they're smart enough to know that they can't do that. I'm smart enough to think that they will kind of sit back and again try and make those opportunities on the counter-attack. If we commit too many men forward, try and break on the very low numbers that we leave back at times. Sometimes we've seen in this competition that if we do commit, for example, a Chempong up high, and we will leave Reece James here as this lone player with whoever is his partner going further up as well. And when we see this, obviously we get this little bit of rotation with Nkunku kind of moving into the central role with KDH going out to the left role. We only leave 3 players back. Now, this system is usually designed to leave 5 players back to counter attacks, but against teams that play this really low block, we've opted at times to kind of alleviate that and just allow both of our kind of wider players to move forward. And against a 3-man backline here, if they are very pressed up to the halfway line like we've seen our centre-backs do at times, and James is here, for example, one long ball over the top after we lose possession, and their striker is in, and they're in for a 1v1, and that's what they will rely on the majority of the time. And though I don't think that will be happening with their centre-forward particularly, I think it's more their wingers that they will try to hit with those long balls. They've got very, very good wingers, especially on this left-hand side with Win. I think he's the danger man for them. If they can get those balls out, they'll really, really back themselves to score goals against us. And if they do get an early goal against us, you know that this low block is just going to get even lower and even more hard to break down, and things could go out of hand very, very easily. So I think what I want to see from Enzo Maresca in this game is for us to not dilly-dally with this kind of, we'll play the three at the back for the majority of the time in the first half, see what happens type of vibe. I would like to see us immediately play the way that we did in the second half versus Legia, with leaving the 2 players back here and being brave enough to know that, sure, they could very well get the ball from a break and then break on us on the counter-attack, but we are good enough as a team to be able to prevent that. We are good enough as a defensive unit to be able to get men back, especially with a player like Caicedo, who's very good at recovering. We're very, very good at doing our counter press and hoping that we can kind of, if we do lose the ball, that we'll win it back immediately. And I hope that we are kind of brave enough to do that tomorrow when we face this Djurgarden side that will be very, very up for this fixture. Obviously, this is the first time they've been in a European semi-final in their history, I believe, or a European final of any kind, I believe, other than the quarter-final. And them getting through to the next round was very, very miraculous, and they'll be up for this game thinking maybe they could perform a miracle. They could be a really, really big highlight here, and especially if they beat a team like Chelsea, who are by far the obvious favourites to win this competition. If they can knock us out, then they'll be held in a massive regard for the rest of their history, which again is something that we do not really have that much. For us, our motivation for these games is not very high, but we are going into this game knowing that a win here, and a dominant win here by multiple goals, will almost certainly secure our place in the final of this competition, where we are expected to win, and we should be winning this game. And as I said, I think this will be a good game. I think that for us, we kind of got lucky with the side of the draw we are on, I would suggest. I think that Djurgarden, as I said, is not as good a team as the teams we've actually faced previously, and you usually expect tournaments to get harder and harder as you kind of progress through them. I think that in this game particularly, it's actually gotten a little bit easier. So maybe even with this relatively strong team that I've put out here, maybe we actually see even more rotations than I've said. Maybe, for example, Shin Maresca can come into the striker role. That could be fun. Maybe we see someone like Genesis Antwi play in the middle, or Atto Amper, or Samuel Raksaki can come into the middle. Hopefully we see a lot of youth players here. And the reason, again, that kind of leads me on to my next point, is the reason why I want to see us be aggressive and kind of take the game to them immediately and get this finished is because winning early in this fixture allows us to do two things. One thing, we can play, obviously, we can play some of the youth players, give them that experience that they need as they kind of integrate into the first team. But also it allows us to rest players early for the Liverpool game, which is more important than this game in my opinion. I think that Liverpool, obviously after winning the Premier League, they are not going to be as motivated to win that game. The only thing they've really got going for them in that game is pride, and they don't really need the pride anymore. They've already won the league, so I don't think they'll be up for that game particularly, and that's a real opportunity for us to take 3 points against a side that we otherwise should basically never be beating. And hopefully we can, as I said, we can take points away from Liverpool there by resting players like, for example, Caicedo. I'd like for him to come off early, maybe even James to come off early, even though I think that he's going to play the full 90 in this game, I'd imagine, and allow those two to be able to feature in the Liverpool game. Again, and Madueke is another one where I think Madueke could definitely start against Liverpool. I think that he's a very dangerous player for us. So hopefully we get to see that. Obviously I've rested Palmer here. If he does play like I suggested with Caicedo not playing, he will need to be another one that gets rested. So hopefully we can wrap the game up really quick and easily by being direct, forcing those mistakes from the back line and not just kind of hoping that we get opportunities. We obviously always create a lot of chances against these sides. And the final thing for us to do then is just to be clinical. We've seen with Madueke recently that he can be clinical in these European games. Hopefully he gets the opportunity. Sancho, again, another one who's providing assists for Madueke. He's getting that end product now. George, again, young player, but he can still finish goals, and he's obviously got his goal in the Premier League recently as well. He'll be very up for this, and hopefully he can get a goal too. Or any other player that plays, for example, like Nicholas Jackson, if he comes on. Hopefully we can be clinical. We can wrap this game up really early, rest players, and then we move on to Liverpool in the league. We'll have to wait and see whether Chelsea can beat Djurgarden and whether we can do it convincingly when they play tomorrow night. I will be doing a pre-match live stream at 6:30, which is already scheduled on the channel, so if you want to watch that with me and react to the lineups with me at the same time, please do come along. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching as ever, and remember, football can be as simple as black and white.